they would start throwing the manuscripts in the river because they know they are going to urinate on it, defile it, or do something to it. You don't want that to happen. So they would throw it in the river, give it to the river and say, take care of it. That also happened. So the person who's teaching you philosophy and religion is also a good doctor. He knows how to even do cataract couching. Nagarjuna was the giver of eyes, giver of light.
I see.
Because he has done this operation.
I see.
Holy cow is used a lot in English, and people, even our own people, use it. And it's actually a derogatory way of referring to something. To say that, oh, it's a holy cow, then you can't touch it, the kind of thing. When the child is young and the mind is fresh, so instead of filling it up with rubbish things like, in Bollywood, who is married to who and all these things, right? All this stupid information that today's kids have, that should not be there in their mind at all.
Sahana Singh ji, namaste. Welcome to the podcast.
Namaste. Thanks for inviting me.
So I've been following you on Twitter for years, and one of the things that you are very well known for is this book. The viewers can see this. It's Revisiting the Educational Heritage of India, and this is a follow-up to an earlier book that you had. I knew it from Kindle. I had the Kindle version. You also had the print version. So let's talk about this first of all. What is the book about? Is it about the Gurukul system? Is it about the ancient Indian educational system? What is it about, and what made you write this book?
So the book is tells you about India's educational heritage, how it had, there was a system of Gurukulas, temple schools, there were brick and mortar universities, different kinds of educational institutions spread across the length and breadth of India.
Yes.
And then it explains, there's a map which I plotted all the different educational centers on that. And I wanted to show how much importance education was given in the Indian society.
Okay.
To ensure that there was right from elementary level to the highest level, what today we would call PhD and postdoc work. All this was covered through our traditional education system. So I've spoken about that. But yes, Guru Shishya Parampara is the main, the fabric that runs through the book. So I've talked about that. Why did I write the book? I think earlier I used to give the reasons like, because we moved to the US. There are reasons at many levels.
Of course.
So on the face of it, it is because we moved to the US. And over there, when I looked at my daughter's history textbook, the world history textbook, and I found that the way India is represented in that book, with just one paragraph or two paragraphs on India and Hinduism, and the way it was portrayed was so negative. They're talking about Sati, caste system, low position of women, superstition, disease. That's all they were talking about. And not a word about the huge contributions that India has made to the world.
Right.
So there was nothing about that. And that's when I said that even though I'm not a historian, I'm not trained in history, but of course, I've always been reading on the side, even though I studied engineering. So I thought, let me just write some writing articles and see how it is taken. And I found a very good response. And that was the time when social media had come. So I thought that, and so people were reading me on a daily basis. So now they were ready to read longer pieces written by me. So I wrote a series of articles, and the educational system was the one which interested me the most because maybe because I come from a family like that. Today I realize it was not just moving to the US. There's a certain kind of karma that was unfolding itself. Because my grandfather and his father, all of them before them, they were all grammarians. They were essentially teachers. And their passion was teaching. Acharyas who spent their whole life teaching. Especially my grandfather, I was reading about how passionate he was about teaching Sanskrit. And he used to go around visiting different Sanskrit schools to see. He was also the inspector at that time, inspector of schools. He used to ensure, whatever problems were there were taken care of. So maybe those things were there at somewhere and I didn't know about those things. It's when I started writing about it, I realized I was connecting to exactly what my forefathers were doing.
Right.
So on the face of it, yes, moving to the US and seeing the deracination, not just among our own, not just among the people in America, that is Indian origin people, but back in India as well.
Yes.
In India as well, because of colonization, everybody going to English medium schools. I find that they look down on Indian ways, the traditional ways of doing anything. So all that I think gave an impetus to my writing.
Right. So how did you do the research for the book? How did you find the material?
So once I started looking it up, initially it was all about the universities like Nalanda, Vikramshila, those things you find very easily. But when I started looking into the Gurukula system, exactly what was being taught, that's when being in America helped, because I had access to the libraries. And there is so much material on India in all the universities in America. Yeah, you will. So my daughter was studying in UT Austin at the time.
Okay.
So I used to frequently drop into her in her university library and spend hours taking notes from there. But even otherwise, when I traveled a lot, I was at that time the editor of a magazine called Asian Water, which was a magazine on water and wastewater for the Asian region. So essentially, I was doing that. I was writing only on water issues for a very long time.
I see.
And that used to take me to different countries where I would represent the magazine. So I've been to Toledo, I've been to all these cities that have a deep connection with India's educational heritage.
I see.
And so when I was in London, I spent a lot of time in the British Library.
Okay.
And got lots of books scanned from there.
They have lots of material.
They have lots of books. So libraries, essentially, I got a lot of books from libraries, which I would scan with my phone scanner, get them all. And then, of course, I also looked at primary sources. Then archive.org started opening up. More and more things, books were available online as time went by. And it became easier. So, but even today, I find that most of the books I need are in the hard copy in print, and they've not yet been digitized.
Not yet digitized, right?
Yeah, a lot of books. Like if I want to know about what the British people said about India, a lot of it is not yet digitized. So the manuscripts of the primary texts are digitized, but a lot of commentaries are not digitized yet.
I see.
So I was looking at primary sources. Then I also went to a lot of Gurukulas. I went to speak to gurus. And then, so I came to know the oral knowledge that had been transmitted, which has not been written down. So I took data from them as well. So these were some of my sources.
So there's a lot of oral knowledge that's not been written down, right?
Yes, a lot of knowledge has not been. And a lot of meanings that we get from books are not correct.
Not correct.
Yes. So you have to speak to Sanskrit experts. So I've spoken to a lot of knowledgeable people, understood from them. And also the knowledge that I wanted was in different languages. So if I would speak to somebody in Kannada, and they would tell me what's in the Kannada books, or somebody with a Hindi medium education would be able to tell me what's in Hindi books. So that's how I got a lot of information, which is not there in English. It's there in the regional languages.
There's a whole lot that is missing that way, right? Because we only look at the English translations and stuff, but there's a whole lot that is not translated.
And when you search on Google, you only get a few pages. You'll not be going into 100 pages, right?
Yes.
It's hard.
Yes.
So that's why I think it's important to to have good libraries where you can look up what's in their catalogs, look up. And these, what I find is that in the American libraries, they make sure that all the books are there. Any new book that comes out in India, I find that a copy comes there very quickly.
I see.
My books are also there in many US libraries.
I see.
Hindi, a lot of Hindi books are also there.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
so
there are people who read that over there?
Now it's there. I'm sure some people might be using it.
I see.
So yeah, the US libraries, the libraries outside India are extremely useful. Today, of course, a lot of things have been digitized by the Indian government itself. So we will find it online. I believe there are lots of websites that you will get where you'll get material.
Right. So what did you discover during your research, and how did you structure the book?
Yeah, the structuring the narrative was the part, right? Because when I was reading Radha Kumud Mukherjee, his book is extremely good. A.S. Altekar, Radha Kumud Mukherjee, Apte, all these people have written on ancient Indian education, right? So now they have voluminous data about ancient Indian universities and things like that. But I wanted to make it a flowing narrative, where it reads like a story. Yeah. So that's how I had to structure it, starting from, so you would probably have seen that I've started with the ceremonies that were performed right from ancient times. We have ceremonies like Upanayana, when a child goes into higher education. A very important ceremony. Even today it is performed, but now it's mostly just ceremonial, and it's not at the beginning of higher education. It's performed whenever it's convenient. But if you go back and see how ceremonies were performed, then you get a lot of information about the culture. So then I started with these ceremonies. Vidyarambha, the first time a child learns to write, it is it is performed sometimes in temples during Saraswati Puja, or it's done at home and people are invited. Same thing with Upanayana. Then there is the graduation ceremony, which was again a very important ceremony, right? So we have got disconnected from all this. So I started with all those ceremonies. Then I went into interesting nuggets. I brought out things like there was it was like a competitive exam to get into Nalanda.
Yeah.
Not like today's competitive exams, but it would be an oral exam where the students will be asked questions, and only 20%, 80% students are rejected, and only 20% are taken into Nalanda's colleges like Nalanda. So those nuggets that I brought out. And then I went into all that. I went into various universities in ancient India and what were they teaching. Ujjain, for instance, I came to know about specializations. I didn't know when I started off that we had certain universities which were sought after for specific subjects.
Yes.
Like for astronomy, mathematics, Jyotisha, Ujjain was the place to go, right? And Vallabhi University was for administration, management. And even today we see that, right? A lot of finance and all that, the best people do come from there, from Gujarat. IIM Ahmedabad is still there. And even in those times, people headed for Vallabhi to study administration, and they would get jobs in governments after that. So I brought out those interesting nuggets, which would make people go deeper into the topic, maybe research more on their own. But for my book, I kept it to the interesting topics, which would whet the curiosity of readers. So that's how. And then I went into first I talked about the glorious period of India's education, when the whole society is contributing to knowledge. People are donating. It was considered very meritorious to donate to the teachers, to acharyas, to students, so that, their needs are taken care of. The students and teachers don't have to worry about where the next meal will come from. They can go and knock at any door and they'll get food to eat. Clothes will be sent to them. If they fall sick, medicines, doctors are available to them. So they can focus completely on education, right? So I spoke about that glorious period when that is the time we produced all those, things that all the disciplines, different disciplines of knowledge which are pursued in universities today. You can see that all the foundations were laid in those times in ancient India, right? Until the 11th, 12th century. It was absolutely the peak in northern India. And then I spoke about how it got destroyed.
Yes.
Because that's a very important question.
It is.
People will ask you, they'll say, okay, if you were so great, then why are you not like that today? Look at your universities today.
Yes.
So I was looking for the answers to that as well. What happened? So then I have this chapter on the destruction of knowledge, how our universities were attacked.
Yeah.
Literally, libraries were burning for months.
Yeah.
So Nalanda, Vikramshila, all by the Islamic conquest when it happened, our knowledge was the higher knowledge was destroyed in big numbers. I mean, in terms of manuscripts, lot of manuscripts were destroyed. The scholars fled wherever they could flee with books that they could carry. Right, but so many of them died. I mean, it is just if you think about the period at that time, what turmoil it was. A place which was, we were devoted to knowledge. It was an idyllic atmosphere, all pursuing their disciplines, right? Society contributing, and now suddenly it's all disrupted, and they're running helter skelter. So on one hand, temples are being destroyed, and the brave efforts of the Purohits who were carrying the images and going hiding in jungles. But the same thing was happening with our books also, with our manuscripts. So there are so many stories of that. So I have written about the destruction. And then comes the British, the colonial period, where there was a different kind of destruction.
Yes.
So I have a whole chapter on that. But I think the biggest chapter in my book, the longest one, is about the transfer of knowledge from India to the rest of the world. So that even today, even though it's the longest chapter, I feel that chapter needs to be extended to double.
Maybe it should be a book in its own right.
It should be a book in its own right. I mean, there's so much knowledge that has been taken from India.
Yes.
And if you catalog the books that have been taken and translated, that itself will be a book.
Yeah.
Right? So I've talked about how knowledge was taken to different parts of the world. It went to China, it went to Greece, it went to Europe. Then on the east, it went to all the Southeast Asian countries, Japan, China. So that's another thing I dealt with. Because these I came to know as I was researching. Because I had no idea that we contributed so much to the development of China.
Indeed.
Or so much to, Europe, for example. It's just mind-boggling when you think of how much we have given to the world. And it's just not acknowledged.
It's mind-boggling to also see how well this has been hidden, suppressed.
It's hidden.
Yeah.
I mean, Greeks are the fathers of everything.
Oh, yeah,
Father
everything.
of astronomy, father of medicine, father of everything. You'll find that they're all Greeks. Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah.
And also when I was, it was also learning for me, because I used to be dismissive of people who said things like Pythagoras went to India, Pythagoras learned from India. This person went to India, Democritus went to India, and I used to just be very dismissive.
Yeah.
I remember, and I've still not deleted those conversations on Facebook where I have actually told somebody not to spin stories.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's a lesson to me that, we should not be dismissive of anything like that. We should go and do our own research.
Yes.
And then slowly it came out of how many people who have, even the Greeks have said that he learned from India. That he learned from the masters of India. Now, we don't know whether he came all the way to India or because India itself extended to the west in those days.
It did,
Afghanistan was part of India.
Yeah.
If you see Iran, Iraq, they were all very much in close contact with India.
Yes.
So Pythagoras has literally just taken everything from, the knowledge of transmigration of souls, as they call it. That animals also have atmas, souls. Then all the mathematics is, we can conclude that if he has taken all these philosophical ideas from India, then he has probably taken the maths as well. Since we already were in our Sulba Sutras, we already had the...
Way before him.
Way before Pythagoras.
Yeah.
So we are already talking about these things and we are using it in the construction of our altars. During our puja, we are making yantras using geometry.
Yes.
We are using algebra, we are doing calculus. So it's very clear that the knowledge has been taken from us, been translated. So it's literally a translation revolution.
Translation. So people like Al-Biruni, etc., they were not polymaths, they were translators.
Correct.
Yeah.
They were. Though I would give a little more credit to the Arabic scientists.
They did give credit to India. They did not hide the fact that it came from India, all this.
And they didn't do blind translation. A lot of them, they did their own, they also did their own observations and then wrote the book. They're not direct translation. If you see Al-Khwarizmi and all the others, they have taken from Brahmagupta, Bhaskaracharya, but they've also added their own to it.
I see.
And they were also, of course, they were using our people also. Our astronomers, our doctors were practicing in Baghdad.
Baghdad, yes.
Baghdad. So the observatories were built by our astronomers. And they were taking the readings because they also wanted the position of the moon and all that for their prayers and things like that. So they were giving credit to India. That is something commendable.
Yes.
Most of their books, you'll find that Al-Hind comes at the
Kitab al-Hisab al-Hind or
Kitab
whatever.
al-Hisab al-Hind.
Yes.
So many of them. And so you can make out they've taken that knowledge from India. And then when it went to Europe, that's when you know the whole story. When Christian Europe was taking knowledge from the Arabs, they didn't want to give any credit to the Arabs because, of course, they would also be attacked if they took any knowledge if it was attributed to the Muslims. So the Christian rulers were not allowing any knowledge from because it was all considered to be unclean knowledge, right? And that's how when the Renaissance happened, a lot of credit has been taken by the Europeans, but actually those books that they wrote were all just translations from the Arabic works.
Yes.
And those Arabic works were from India.
That's right.
And that's how India's name has got left out.
Yeah. So essentially all of this science that's been developed and all that, it's based on the foundations created by Indians.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that is something we need to bring to the public consciousness.
Yes.
First of all, it has to be understood by our own people in India.
First of all.
Right?
Yeah.
So if you see the books that we studied in school, nowhere did we learn about the great contributions of India ourselves. We didn't learn it.
Yeah.
And so when we look at what the Western people in their textbooks, what they are writing about India, they are actually taking from our own writings. The leftist historians of India who became the authorities, right? Dr. Meenakshi Jain names them all the time, right? Romila Thapar, Irfan Habib, all these people. So whatever they said became history.
Yes.
And that's how all the contribution of ancient Indians in mathematics and astronomy, language, all this got missed out.
Yes.
And so now we have to infer. We have to now go back and then we have to get these sources out. And so I'm, of course, very grateful to people like Rajiv Malhotra, whose books were very helpful, Being Different, then the Sanskrit non-translatables and all those books. And that's how we came to know about those Sanskritists in Europe, in London, right, in the 18th century, who, because of the influence of Sanskrit, they took so many ideas from there.
Yes.
Structuralism came from there. Then linguistics came from the study of Sanskrit.
Yes.
So we can see that we have spawned whole disciplines, new disciplines came up like linguistics.
Yes.
Because of the works of Panini and the other Sanskrit grammarians.
Yes.
So I think we need to now, all these, we need new research, we need books to be written talking about how Indian work has influenced Europe.
Yes,
That
correspondence, one-to-one correspondence.
One-to-one correspondence. All that has to be studied and made public.
Mhm.
And we need scholarly works on this. And of course, we have to tackle the bias. Now, what has happened is because the colonial history is written,
Mhm.
the colonial missionary agendas,
Yes.
agenda-driven history has all been written. And so we are now forced to quote them all the time. Because now when you do all this, when you write a new work, you have to quote all the others who wrote before you.
Mhm.
And so people are forced to quote these colonial historians who have written with their biases. And those biases are not specified. Like you won't even know that some of them are driven by the Christian missionary agenda when you read it, right?
Mhm.
Nobody knew that. Even Max Muller had that
Yeah.
agenda.
Yes.
Everybody had it. Even Macaulay had it,
Yes.
right? So that is hidden. And so when they write, those biases are not known. And then whatever they're saying is considered as, gospel
Gospel truth. Yes.
So I think there's a lot of work to be done by Indic historians.
Mhm.
And then we have to do a lot of decolonization. A lot of the way we look at the world is through those colonial lenses. And we have to examine each of those biases. That where did this come from? Why are we thinking this way? And then get to the root of it.
That's going to take a lot of work because these biases are hidden. These are not apparent and visible biases. You read a book, it's going to have very subtle, flavors of whatever in there. It's very hard to
Some of it is
decode that.
unintentional. Some of in the sense that
Often.
we ourselves are biased.
Yeah.
Right? Like
We have absorbed all those biases and all those things.
we have. And the fact that we speak in English.
Yeah, there you go.
So we use a lot of terms, a lot of the language itself in English is against the pagans, is against the indigenous people.
Mhm.
So that is the language.
Lord, for example. What's a Lord? Lord Krishna. I mean, how is he a Lord?
Exactly. How is he a
Lord
lord?
is a title of nobility or aristocracy.
Why is he a lord?
Yeah, there you go.
Then terms like false gods, right? And G with a small g. I mean, the God written with a small g. If it is those pagan gods.
That's a small g. Yeah.
And only capital G for God. That
For
is
their God.
Christian God.
The Abrahamic God.
Abrahamic God.
Yes.
So a lot of these things are there, a lot of expressions. Holy cow. Holy cow is used a lot in English and even our own people use it. And it's actually a derogatory way of referring to something.
Yeah.
To say that, oh, it's a holy cow, then you can't touch it, the kind of thing. It's irrational, basically.
Irrational, yes.
So
Superstitious.
It's accepted, you can't question it. That kind of thing. So
Dogma.
Yeah. So we have these unconscious biases when we use the English language.
Yes.
So these also we have to grow out of. We have to keep pointing out, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed.
This is another reference to the cross that when we speak.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, it refers to the cross.
Yes.
Okay.
So nowadays I say palms folded, everything goes well.
Right, yes. So what is it that the people of India should know about the ancient Indian education system? How was it structured? What was it like?
So the way it went was that, there were two kinds of education systems. One was for skills.
Okay.
So, the artisans, the people who do carpentry, textile, weaving, painting, sculpting, so many there were like different skills and professions. And that's how the Jati system came, right?
Okay.
Which is also in the other parts of the world, in Europe also. So all the people with different skills were in their own Jatis, and through the Jati, knowledge was being transmitted. So if you're born into a sculptor's family, then you would learn how to sculpt, with different materials, clay, stone, different things you would learn. And then that knowledge would be carefully preserved and transmitted to the next generation.
Okay.
So they would not have to go so deep into the Vedas and things like that. They would not need to go into all the details of the Vedas or details of how to do the yagya, right? Or too many details about language. Yes, they did study language because that also, when you know the literature, that will affect the way you do the sculpting. So whatever was needed for that profession, whatever knowledge was needed was absorbed, was taught in a systematic way. And that's how it went from generation to generation. But there was also the Vedic education system. where, you go to a Gurukula and you study under a Guru, and the students have to go through that ceremony before they leave for the Gurukula, wherein the mother will feed the child for the last time with her hands, because after this, when the child goes to the Gurukula, then he's going to be with the Guru, is the father and mother. And so completely living under the shadow of the Guru, the student would learn day and night different things, different aspects of subjects. So there would be, of course, the traditional learning of texts, but there would also be a lot of non-verbal knowledge that would be transmitted by living in the Gurukula. And of course, a lot of tasks that were given by the Guru to different students. And the student, the Guru would have a different approach for each of the students. It will not be the same way that everybody is being taught.
Mm-hmm.
So some students would be asked to spend more time outdoors, observing everything. Some others, who already know a lot, who understand the different connections in the universe, would be given different work to do. So in this way, the Guru would give different tasks and make sure that they all understand and absorb the knowledge of the Vedas.
Mm-hmm.
And there were very strict rules about how you have to conduct yourself. So from the morning to the evening, you have to wake up very early. There are a lot of chanting. There are a lot of shlokas to be chanted. Then the meanings that have to be understood. Then there are debates, there are discussions. So there was a time for this throughout the day.
Okay.
And you would, of course, be doing a lot of tasks like bringing water from the well. You would be helping in the cleaning. You'd be helping in cooking. So these things actually were also very important. Today, when you see the students, what they are learning in schools, many of them don't know anything about how to take care of their health.
Yes.
So if they have a cold or cough, they'll probably think, okay, I have to get some medicine from the dispensary. They won't know what to take from the kitchen, something which is in the kitchen itself, which is food,
Mm-hmm.
which is a herb or a spice. Use it to make sure you feel better. Now, all these things were part of the Gurukul education, where the students would know what are the healthy foods, what are the things to do if you're not feeling good, you're feeling tired. So the Guru's wife is there teaching you. So these two systems were there, where you have a Gurukul Vedic education system, where the knowledge of the Vedas would be transmitted, which would take anything from, I think, 8 to 12 years for the student to learn. And so they would have to be, they would be well versed with for small things about the Vedas, the fine things about the Vedas, the different meanings. And the other one is the skill system, where the students are going to become experts in that skill. And many times, the students would come and live with the same, just like the Gurukula, Vedic Gurukula. Even while learning a skill, a student would come and live with the master who's teaching the skill. So if you're learning something, say about, you're learning how to be a good doctor, a Vaidya. So you would be living in the doctor's house, the Vaidya's house, and you would be, a bunch of students would be living there, eating the same food, helping the family in their tasks, and spending time with the Vaidya and seeing how the Vaidya prepares different kinds of medications for different patients. How is he concluding what disease the patient has? The Vaidya will discuss with the students. And I'm sure when writing came, they would also be taking notes. If not, there would be easy ways to remember. So the Vaidya would teach them, this is the way you remember what medicine to give. And many things would be committed to memory. So, Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, you should be able to just chant it. You should be able to say it and then remember what medicine has to be given. Then how you prepare those medicines. Should you give it as a paste? Should you make a drink out of it? Should you mix it in the food? All these things are taught. And imagine this being taught with every profession, in every profession.
Indeed, yes.
Right? It could be singing, it could be dancing, music also. I mean, if they were, in my book, I've given an excerpt of quite a modern day example of a Guru Shishya Parampara with reference to music. And the student talks about how while doing some washing or something, the Guru would sing and explain certain nuance of the raga as they were doing some other tasks, not when the class was going on.
But you're still learning.
You're still learning. You're learning all the time because the Guru is like a book. Guru is a walking, talking encyclopedia of that subject. And now it's up to the student to get it out of the Guru.
Yes.
So you have to make the Guru happy with you. You have to win the trust of the Guru. And of course, you will feel the love for the Guru. Because when you see somebody who is selflessly giving the knowledge to you, you will feel the love.
Yes.
And that bonding will lead to the knowledge being imparted. And that's why you will find that certain students will get more knowledge out of the Guru. Because then they want to take it from the Guru. And a Guru is not going to force feed you.
Yes.
He's not going to each time say, come, listen, learn this. No. If the student is not interested, then the Guru is not going to be chasing you for it, right? And that's how you see it in Mahabharata. All these, actually what I'm talking about, you'll find it in Mahabharata, Ramayana also. How certain students would learn, how Arjuna used to learn from Drona. He's taking inspiration from the Guru. Then on his own, he's doing certain exercises by himself, right? Like how he was in the dark, he started shooting arrows in the dark to see if he can still hit the target. And so when the Guru sees that this student is so interested, then he's going to teach more. He'll go deeper into the subject with that student. So I think these are the ways in which knowledge was transmitted. But basically, we should remember that the Vedas were actually governing everything. So the knowledge of, even if you're not directly studying the Veda, the impact of the Vedic learning was also felt in the other skill-based education as well. They also had their Upanayana ceremony. They also had their graduation. Okay, so it was similar, but not exactly like they have to learn every shloka exactly as it is done in the Vedic education.
Right.
Then there was military training that also had its own separate Upanayana.
Okay.
Right, where they learned the different arms, how to use the different arms. They learned the science behind it. And you'll be astonished to know the number of subjects that used to be there. Like, how to make chariots. And in military training, there's also like, how to get into a moving chariot, how to jump out of a moving chariot. All these things were taught.
I see.
Yeah.
Pretty detailed.
It was detailed. The only problem is that, if we do not have text for everything, because a lot of things they got lost. When you write on palm leaves, when you write on perishable material, it is not going to stay forever.
Yes.
And so you write it on that and then you commit it to memory. Then even if it gets destroyed, it's okay. It's there in the mind and it will be taught to the next generation. So we don't have all the texts. And plus, of course, there are many millions of manuscripts that are not translated yet.
Indeed, they're just lying around. Yeah.
They're lying around. They're lying in millions of manuscripts in libraries. In Britain, I believe, has a lot.
I see.
UK, then Taiwan. A friend told me that there are a whole lot of manuscripts over there.
Okay.
China and Taiwan. A lot of it was translated to Chinese. So I think that it's good if Indians learn Chinese and go and read those manuscripts and translate them back into Sanskrit. That is also something that needs to be done. Because, a manuscript was found in one of the monasteries in, I think, Zhejiang in China, which was talking about the gynecological diseases.
I see.
So some traveling monk from India, Buddhist monk, was carrying that book with him. And he has handed it over to that monastery. It was in Sanskrit and then it was translated to Chinese. And then that monastery became a center for a lot of women to go and get treated for their gynecological diseases.
I see.
So you see that book is there, that manuscript is there. So similarly, there must be so many others in different monasteries, different libraries. And I think we should start getting them all back. That is the work to be done by the next generation of researchers. So they need to see what are in all those manuscripts. Is there any useful knowledge there? Can we get it back? Even if it's not useful knowledge, we need to know what is in it.
We need to know all the entire extent of knowledge that's out there.
Cataract couching. There were manuscripts found on eye surgeries, complex eye surgeries that were done by Indians. Because remember, in Nalanda, Vikramshila and all, it was not just Buddhism that they were learning. We were taught that Buddhism went from India to China, India to Japan and all these things.
A lot more went out.
Yeah, so we thought, okay, they're only teaching Buddha's teachings. But no, the knowledge of medicine, knowledge of mathematics, all went with that. So cataract couching.
Okay.
So they did cataract surgeries in those days. And in those days, religion and science were not separated. So the person who's teaching you philosophy and religion is also a good doctor. He knows how to even do cataract couching. So imagine, that is the way it was done. Nagarjuna was considered to be one of the there's a work which says that Nagarjuna was the giver of eyes, giver of light.
I see.
Because he has done this operation.
I see.
So I think this is the work that we need to do, which is to find out what are all the works that what are the Indian works that went outside India, in Japan. And remember, they used to be preserved better in those temperatures.
Actually,
So Japan has a lot of manuscripts well preserved. Tibet had a lot. It was even mentioned by Atisa when he went. He said, there's so much which is preserved so well here in Tibet. It's not so well preserved in India.
Right.
So we need to translate them back.
Yeah, the climate over there in Tibet, etc., is really dry and cold, so it preserves things well. There's the cave of the Thousand Buddhas, I think it's called.
Yes.
There's the Mogao caves. There are a bunch of caves over there where there's a tremendous amount of manuscripts. Many of them were taken to England by Oral Stein, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
And so on. So there's a lot out there. Everything here has been destroyed or it's lying somewhere, but there's a lot outside.
So here also, I believe that a lot of families were keeping manuscripts. There was a project done recently wherein they went to different families and saw what books they were having.
I see.
Because, it's kept like a family heirloom. Those manuscripts belong to my great-grandfather and I don't know what's in them, but they're kept carefully.
Yeah.
So that way they had them. And when these agraharas, agraharas in South India are the places where the Brahmins used to live and teach. Because the agrahara was also like an educational institution.
Okay.
Because in all these Brahmins' houses, students could go and learn from them in their houses. So there will be a veranda in front where the teacher would sit and the students will all learn from them.
Okay.
And adjacent houses, they're teaching different subjects.
I see.
So it's imagine in the middle of the street, there will be a debate going on because this student has just come out from here, studied something, and there's another student. So if they meet on the way, they are discussing. And debates would happen spontaneously in agraharas, right? And so all of them used to maintain manuscripts. And so there was a project where those were being scanned and they were being looked up to see what they contain. But I'm also told that a lot of these manuscripts were sold like raddi, when people had to move.
I see.
Because they had to vacate. These lot of these agraharas are no longer agraharas, right? They are now shops there, and they've been taken over by the other, the demographic changes that are happening. So a lot of agraharas have gone to the other communities.
I see.
And so these manuscripts were given away as raddi. And because they are thinking it's not useful to us, they are now educated in English, today's generation, and they're thinking, what is there? It's not going to be useful to me. And they give it away.
I see. That's sad. So we had Gurukuls and we had these educational centers where you would teach skills. And was this spread all across India?
All across India.
Okay.
North, south, east, west. And you'll be surprised to know that there were so many migrations and there was so much of mobility of scholars.
Okay.
So one of the things that you asked me, what surprised you? I was surprised to see the degree of mobility of the scholars and the students.
Okay.
Like I used to think in thousands of years ago, it would be so hard. There's no train, there's no plane. You will take days or maybe a month to go from one end of India to the other. Why would you go so far to study? You would just study whatever is available locally. But no, you will notice that in Ujjain, Bhaskaracharya, for example, is from Karnataka.
Okay.
So he has gone from Karnataka to Madhya Pradesh to study, right? Similarly, you'll find from Kashmir also there were students who had gone to study in Nalanda, right? And of course, when Zhuangzhang has come from China to study, so what is all this? So people were traveling all over. Vallabhi, they are going. So there is, in Katha Sarit Sagara, there is a father who is saying that in one of the stories, he's saying, I'm going to send my son to study in Vallabhi because over there he will study administration and finance, which is what I want him to study.
Okay.
Now, he is living in the Gangetic plain, but he's not sending him to Kashi or Mathura or any of the nearby places. He sent him there to west, to Gujarat to study administration. So this was fascinating that they are going all over to whichever institute they want to study in. And sometimes they would know the name of the guru also.
I see.
In fact, most of the time, they want to study under this guru.
Okay.
So they would go and study under that guru. And of course, you don't know whether the guru will accept you, but you will try.
Yes.
And the other thing is that I Ching, for example, I Ching from China, I learned that he went to Indonesia first. Indonesia was like a mini India.
It was kind of an extension of India, wasn't it?
India. And there he learned Sanskrit. He spent an year there or more than a year learning different
Prep school, was it?
Prep school. And then he tries to get admission into Nalanda.
Okay.
And then near Nalanda also, there were so many villages where coaching was being given to students who could not clear if they were not able to clear in the first attempt, then they would get some coaching and maybe try again.
I see.
To get through into Nalanda, Vikramshila, all of them. They were collaborating universities. They were competing and they were also collaborating.
I see.
Yeah, like Nadia and Mithila. They were. So Mithila was an old school, of grammar and logic and various other subjects. It became a big center of logic actually. And so there was one student who was studying there in Mithila. He was not allowed to copy. Mithila had a rule that you cannot copy anything. You have to learn and you can't take any notes from here or any books.
I see.
So everybody has to memorize and leave with their certificate, but they can't carry any notes. So this person, I forgot his name, I think Sarvabhauma, I think was his name, from Mithila. He was very upset that he's not being allowed to copy anything.
Okay.
So he went and started his own institute in Nadia.
Okay.
Where he had committed 2 or 3 books completely to memory, and he went and wrote it down after he came out. And then he started his own university in Nadia. And Nadia started attracting more better students than Mithila at one stage. So they were competing, Nadia and Mithila.
I see.
So imagine in those days, and Nadia became such a big center of logic, Nyaya, Tarka, those subjects that they used to study in those times, which we don't have today. We don't study logic.
We don't study that at all, yes.
So we don't even know different kinds of evidence, this is visual evidence.
Pramana, right?
Pramana. So the way they studied Pramana, and if you see all the debates that have gone on throughout in our country, debate was such a way of progressing knowledge. So, and the public is watching. The debate tournaments were the hallmark of our country. It was not like the gladiator tournaments where, the crowd is coming to see who is killing who.
Yeah.
I'm sure those kind of tournaments, all fighting tournaments were also happening. But these debate tournaments used to be conducted by kings themselves. The good kings of India, like all of them, Raja, Bhoja and all these, Vikramaditya. They all used to have these debate tournaments where scholars will come from around the world and they would compete. And the winners would be taken around in a chariot around the city so that people would know that these are your role models. If you speak well, you're good in public speaking, you're able to put forward the finer points of a philosophy very well and use good language, very embellished language, then these are the people whom you should be emulating. So that's the way it was conducted. Knowledge, it was all over India. Every part of India. Kerala. You know about the Kerala school of mathematics.
Very famous, right? Yes.
Of course, Dr. C.K. Raju says, don't call it Kerala school as if it's some different school. Because it was the same mathematics that Aryabhatta was teaching. Yes. So they were calling themselves as Aryabhatta students only. But it's just that a whole lot of them were in Kerala.
Yes.
It became an ecosystem of learning.
Madhava is the...
Madhava. Sangama Grama.
Sangama Grama, yes.
So we had this ecosystem of learning where a number of scholars would be living in close proximity and they would all be feeding or sparking ideas from each other. They would be debating.
Yes.
And students are coming, studying from them. Now students are also debating.
Yes.
So if you see the Shankaracharya, Madhvacharya, Ramanujacharya debates, they're going across the generations. It's not, even though those gurus are no more,
yes,
the students are still debating.
Yes.
And new points are being put forward. So that's what it was. And this is the ecosystem that got destroyed with the coming of the Muslims and the British.
Right. So we had this entire ecosystem across India, maybe even beyond what we call India today, like Indonesia and all that.
Nepal, China, Southeast Asia, Cambodia.
Cambodia, of course.
Cambodia has an inscription in Sanskrit, which is such a big inscription, it's like a book.
Okay.
It's like 50 to 100, 108 verses are also there in one of the inscriptions.
I see.
And the kavya, the standard of kavya is very, very high, it seems.
I see.
Very beautiful. Some say it is even better than what you find in India. So we were sparking these scholars, we were feeding all these scholars. And you have the story of Atisa, for example. Atisa from Vikramshila University, Nalanda or Vikramshila, both were under his charge.
Okay.
So Atisa was courted by the king of Tibet. He sent envoys after envoys to persuade him to go and live in Tibet and revitalize knowledge over there. And he was refusing to come. He was saying, I'm too old and I've got these 2 universities under me. I can't travel again. I'm too old. But then they never gave up. So they sent one envoy came, he lost some people on the way, so many people died in his entourage.
Okay.
He brought so much gold and gifted it, but he refused to come. Then after that, another envoy came and he had better luck.
Okay.
And then Atisa himself had a dream that the Devi was telling him, Tara was saying, go to Tibet, they need you. And then he said, I still need 1 more year. So he made the envoy stay there. And in that period, the envoy started translating one of the books to Tibetan. Okay. And then after he handed over his work, Atisa, then he went with him they traveled all the way to Tibet. On the way, he's winning debates in different countries as he's passing through different countries.
I see.
And finally, he spent 20 years or 10 years there in Tibet.
Yeah, kings from foreign countries like China, etc., they used to fight for Indian scholars. For example, we have Kumarajiva, over whom various Chinese kings fought,
Yes.
They fought each other for
It was very interesting in one. And in one, scholar was killed by, got killed by one emperor because he didn't want the other guy to get him.
Okay, so that's...
look at this competition for getting the best scholars from India.
Yes. Now, how was the education system subsidized? Who paid for that?
So it used to be kings. Kings would reward the scholars who were known for their teaching. So they would say the revenue of so many villages will be given to this matha.
Okay.
Because this guru is doing very good work. So all the revenues of those villages will go there. The food grown over there will be feeding these scholars. So kings and the common public, that the taxes that they were giving was being used for education. So the revenues, it would be demarcated that this agrahara will get from this village, that agrahara from that village. So in this way, common people were contributing to the food and the medicine and any requirement of the students and the scholars.
I see.
So that's the way it worked.
So there were no fees. Students did not pay fees.
Typically, there were no fees because it was considered to be that, there was this thing that knowledge should never be charged.
Yes.
So that is the only way you will ensure that the people with adhikara will be taught. Otherwise, anyone will pay money and say, okay, teach me this vidya.
Yes.
But he wants to use it for some bad purpose. So the guru doesn't want that. But Guru Dakshina used to be given. At the end of the education period, every Shishya would give something to the Guru, which would show is a token of his appreciation and love. That would be there. And I found it very interesting that Vyasa Tirtha, one of the very important gurus of India, again a person who is not as well known as he should be. He's from the Madhva Sampradaya. He was the advisor for Krishna Devaraya, the Vijayanagar Empire, if you see. Krishna Devaraya, in the morning, the first thing he would do is take blessings from his guru before he went and did his work. Right? And he was one of those kings, one of the ideal kings. Flourishing of knowledge, wealth, everything, prosperity. He built Hampi, those beautiful buildings over there. So Vyasa Tirtha said that whenever you conquer a territory, make sure that the scholars are not harmed. And also you build some new Gurukula there, new schools there, so that the people over there get good education. So that is the way they functioned. So the kings used to be totally there, making sure that the scholars are well endowed so that they can teach. And that endowment means the food has to be enough. So you will find in Ennairam in Tamil Nadu, there are lots of inscriptions which give details of how much money is to be given to each student, each level of student. So those who are studying the easier subjects would be given a little lower, the scholarship compared to the ones who are studying the higher subjects. Then the teacher would get this much. So that would be in terms of grain. So much of grain to be given, so much of, it could also be gold coins or anything, which are to be given for the study, for the scholars. And they would also be attached hospitals for the students if they fall sick. And I must tell you about mathas. The mathas were temples where you could go and pray. There were also places where you can stay. If you are a traveler going through some town, you would say, where is the nearest matha? And you can stay there. And you'll get food there. So travelers can stay there. Students will be studying there. Classes will be going on. And the travelers can also, if they want, they can watch or they can join one of those classes. And there would also be veterinary hospitals there, in the sense that the Vaidya who is there in that matha can take care of the animals that are traveling with you. So if your horse is not feeling well or your any other animal with you is not feeling well, they would take care of that also. So these mathas are multi-purpose educational institutions, and they were also funded by the kings and the common people around. And in this context, I think I should mention Sindh. Punjab. So in Punjab, there is this famous British writer, can't remember his name right now. He wrote about the education in Punjab. And he wrote about how everybody is competing to donate to the educational institutions. So they give, even if he's a thief, even if he's a rogue, he wants to say that I gave so much to this Pathshala. So that is the culture. So when you ask how was it funded, the people are all wanting to fund. They know that preserving education is so important for our culture, for our survival. So if we do not feed the Brahmanas and the students, then it's bad for us. So that's the way education was funded.
And what are the roots of our education system? How far back does it go?
Now, this is that the chronology that we have is being pushed backward.
Yeah.
So if you go by the British colonial sources, they will just tell you that some 5th century common era or something like that.
Uh-huh.
But personally, I would say it probably goes back to more than 3000 BCE.
Mm-hmm.
Because Mahabharata itself is said to have happened around that time, according to the traditional scholars. So I would say it definitely goes back to 5000 years at least, but more, possibly even more.
Right. So we used to have these debates and things like that even during the Vedic time, right? The scholars debating each other and all that.
Absolutely. Debate was a way in which scholars would test each other, and it was also a way of knowing the opponent's point of view. So even there would be an appreciation of the opponent for arguing well, following all the rules of the debate. There were so many rules of debate that you cannot obfuscate, you cannot shift the target, you cannot shift the topic, right? All those things. There are I've listed in my book, there were 22 points that were mentioned by one of the gurus. He wrote a book on what were the points, where the points should be deducted in a debate and where it should be added.
Okay. So how did the decline of the education system happen? When does it start?
Well, I see that in North India, definitely around the 11th century. 11th century Common Era, when all the Muslim invasions happened, you can directly see the destruction of Nalanda, Vikramshila, all these universities in a row. And then over a period of time, as the rule, the scholars were fleeing those Muslim-dominated areas. They were going to places where Hindu kings were still ruling, and that's where they would carry the manuscripts too. But over a period of time, the Muslim rule extended to those places also. That's how Vallabhi also got destroyed. How Kashi was destroyed. So all these centers of learning, when temples were destroyed, you could say that education was also being destroyed.
Exactly.
Because all these temples were freely allowing their facilities to be used by scholars.
Yes.
So even if they were not declared to be schools as such, any of those temple halls could be used for teaching Sanskrit, various subjects. When a temple is destroyed, you have destroyed the education also. But they would keep rebuilding and trying to come back. So when the troops would leave, they would come back. Right? Now, one of the most poignant stories that I read about was in Sri Rangam temple.
Okay.
So Sri Rangam temple, there is a description of how it was destroyed. So there was some festival going on in the 14th century. And there were some 12,000 sadhus who had all collected over there for that festival. And there was some puja and all that was going on, some dance programs and everything. Then the news came that the Muslim army is coming towards them.
Okay.
The Ulugh Khan, or some people say Malik Kafur. So the army was approaching. It was still many hours away. And so quickly, the priest of that temple, took the murti out from there, and he started taking it away to take it to a safe place. And all these 12,000 ascetics were told not to leave. Be there and try to act as a barrier between the army and the temple and try to save the temple to the extent you can. So all of them stuck there. They didn't go even though they knew the army is coming. And there's the story of Sudarshana Suri. He was a very well-known scholar. He had just written his manuscript of Ramanujacharya's work. He had written a commentary on Ramanujacharya's work. And it was called Shruta Prakashika, his work.
Okay.
And he was very afraid it will fall into the hands of the invaders. So he quickly gave his that manuscript to Vedanta Desika, who was his student, and said, guard it, keep it safe and take it and make sure that it reaches the people. They should not get destroyed by the invaders. So he promised him. And he also gave his 2 sons and said, take care of them. The guru told the student to take care of the manuscript and his children. Okay. And then in the massacre that happened, so the Sudarshana Suri, of course, died. All those 12,000 ascetics died. And Vedanta Desika was lying there pretending to be a dead body, but holding on to the manuscript. And then when the marauders went away, then he took this manuscript to safety. He went to Melkote, which is in Karnataka. Okay. And then he went there and he made it public. Then he himself lived there many years and wrote books himself. And that's how he kept the tradition alive.
I see.
So these are all the stories that you will get of how the manuscripts were being destroyed. And sometimes what the scholars would do is that if they got the news that they are coming, the marauders are coming, they would start throwing the manuscripts in the river.
Okay.
So that, because they know they are going to urinate on it, defile it or do something to it. You don't want that to happen. So they would throw it in the river, give it to the river and say, take care of it. That also happened. So these stories you'll find all over India. And so the northern part of India was first, which came under attack. And that's where the destruction of education was quite high. And then the scholars who fled to the south, they kept it going over there. So it was there for a longer time. And of course, it was the Islamic period, I think, was shorter there if you compare it with the north, even though it was quite brutal, very brutal. Srirangam is in Tamil Nadu.
Yes.
So that's how they would be fleeing to different places, and that's how our Hinduism is still intact, and we still have so many of our manuscripts. That's because they would be taken to safety wherever possible. So there would be a lot of destruction, but some amount of it would be retrieved. And then we hear of Jain scholars who are also taking manuscripts and protecting it, and they set up underground libraries. I mean, they went to Jaisalmer, hid here and there, and then they made underground libraries to keep the manuscripts.
I see.
So that happened. But anyway, the destruction, of course, because scholars cannot be living in fear and teaching as they were doing in ancient times. So that's how all that got destroyed. It would keep coming back, but not in the same grandeur. It would not be at the same level that it used to be before. So students would be lesser. The best teachers would not be there. All this happened. And then came the period of colonialism, which according to me was more destructive than the Muslim period.
British colonialism.
British colonialism.
Okay.
I mean, all colonialism. Portuguese also. I mean, all the colonial period was a period of extraction, taking away our knowledge and giving no credit for it. Right. So even if you take this Garcia de Hota of Portugal, he took so much of Ayurvedic knowledge and published so many papers in Portugal. They were all published in journals. And we don't get the name of the person who has given that knowledge to him. Who was the Vaidya who has given him that knowledge? And the other thing the British did is, of course, when they changed the language of instruction. And the medium of instruction became English. And that's when people all started feeling that our languages are not getting us good jobs. It's only when we study English. And on top of that, science and technology. Since we had been ruled by the Muslims, and then we had lost touch with our ancient knowledge. So we had now literally fallen back in our knowledge of science and math and everything. A lot of things we no longer knew what Brahmagupta had said, what Bhaskaracharya had said. We didn't care. And we were too poor because we had been taxed so heavily by the Muslims, and then came the British who made the taxes go up to like 40-50% of the produce.
That's right.
So if you're living a hand-to-mouth existence, how are you going to even think about then educating the next generation of people?
You won't.
So that was happening. Poverty was there. And then when the British introduced English, and they came across as people who are very knowledgeable and very cultured, and they went about telling these people that, look, your practices are disgusting. They're superstitious. What are you doing? I mean, what kind of clothes are you wearing? Look at, what we are wearing. Those are the clothes that they came wearing. And they were making fun of everything that the Indians did, right? The dhoti kurta clad people. What kind of maths are you doing? I mean, the way you're writing, you don't even know how to do anything. So they made them lose confidence. They made them feel that they are worthless. And if you really want knowledge, then you should learn English. Serve us. We will build your schools, and then we will civilize you. So I think the worst thing that happened with the coming of the British was deracination and self-loathing, which is continuing to this day.
It is.
A lot of people today, even now, think that Indian knowledge is ancient and not relevant today. Right? So, we have to move with the times. How long can you be in the past? They don't realize it's not past. That was knowledge which is timeless, which is meant for all times. So I think this is what happened. Physical destruction of higher education during the Muslim period, and then the mental colonization that happened with the coming of the British.
One thing that's thrown at us is that in the ancient Indian education system, women were not educated, girls, and so-called low caste, high caste, there was this divide also. Is there any truth to that?
So the thing is that in the Vedic period, we can see a lot of women scholars. In the Veda, Rig Veda itself, so many names are mentioned, right? Women scholars are there. Apala is there, Maitreyi. All these people are there. And we are having debates between women and men. So Janaka, Gargi are having a debate. Right? So all these esoteric debates were happening. On top of that, there were a lot of subjects that was being studied by women, and I have a whole chapter on women's education in my book. So there were subjects that were studied by the women exclusively, and there's a name for, the names are given for those subjects. So women were definitely teachers. They were teaching upadhyay, upadhyayani, upadhyay, so all these words, the male upadhyaya, female upadhyaya. So, all of them were, the teachers were teaching. But then, of course, you have to understand that women also had a biological role. So they have to also bring out, procreate. They have to bring the next generation. So it was understood that if all the women go into learning and teaching, then they won't have so much time for the house. So in this sense, there were fewer women who were going into full-time education. And there were more women who were grihinis, looking after the homes, families. But then they also, because, if you look at the jati-based education that used to be given, all the jatis are preserving knowledge, and that involved the women as well.
Okay.
So if there is a Vaidya's family, the Vaidya's wife also would know everything about medicine. Because she is helping him in preparing the medicine. So she's also, so in a way that the whole family would have that same, similar knowledge. So in that sense, women were never excluded. They were all there. They are preparing the medicines. So if you're in a sculptor's family, the women would know all about sculpting. Then if you're an account keeping family, then the women would know all about numbers, how to keep accounts. So in that sense, they were all families who were having the knowledge, keep preserving the knowledge. But otherwise, women they were Brahmavadinis in ancient times, who would go exclusively into studying the Vedas.
Okay.
And then they would not have family ties. They would keep wandering all over India, studying, learning, sitting with gurus. That happened. Or there would be those who would study until the marriage. And then after marriage, they would or they would not. Because it's mentioned in Kama Sutra that an urban man should ensure that his wife continues her education after marriage. Her education should not be stopped.
Okay.
So we can easily imagine that, women who were good at some skill, even after marriage, they would be continuing with that. Maybe dance classes are still happening, music classes are still happening. All that I can easily imagine. Plus, one very good evidence that I got was from Karnataka, where there's a carving of Savinir Madi. There is a lady whose carving was found in Kolar.
Okay.
And that shows a woman whose name, her name is given Savinir Madi, her father's name, mother's name, and the inscription says that she's very knowledgeable. She's an expert in so many subjects, and it doesn't say that she's married.
Okay.
It doesn't say her husband's name. If it mentions her father's and mother's name only, it means she's not married.
Okay.
So here is a woman who is being honored by the whole village with a sculpture because she's so educated. So I don't think it's correct to say that women were not being allowed to study, but we have to say that it also depended on how much the woman wanted to study.
Of course.
So if it is driven by you, if she is very hell-bent on studying and going forward with her education, I think she would have found a way. Even if she has got married and there is a lot of household work to do, I feel that those women were still doing it, but maybe not in huge numbers.
Okay. And what was typically the medium of education? What language was used to impart education?
So what I can see is we have the evidence of Dharampal. Right? Yes. Dharampal has extracted all the surveys that were conducted by the British, and they were the pre-colonial education system surveys.
Yes.
And that gives you a hint about what it was like before the British came. And you find that in different parts of India, they were studying in their own languages. So in Bengal, they were studying in Bengali. In Tamil Nadu, they were studying in Tamil. Andhra, they were studying in Telugu. Karnataka, Kannada, Hindi, Punjabi, all languages, they were studying in their own language. And they were studying Ramayana, Mahabharata. They were studying mathematics. They were studying literature. So it was all in the regional languages. But of course, if you went for higher education, then Sanskrit is a must. It is the most precise language where you can frame an argument, right? So Sanskrit was known as the scholar's language, but at the primary education level, the local languages were being used.
So Sanskrit was the language that tied India together, the civilizational language.
Because all the languages have come from Sanskrit.
Yes.
So you can see that in the vocabulary of all the Indian languages.
Yeah,
right?
We have Sanskrit everywhere.
So they will have come from Sanskrit, which is so rich, so scientific. And the Sanskrit grammar has impacted all the other grammars in the other languages.
Yes.
So that was it. It was Sanskrit was definitely binding, and the scholars, when they met, would actually converse in Sanskrit. So there is evidence of Swami Vivekananda when he met the Mysore Maharaja, he spoke in Sanskrit.
I see.
Yeah. So those things, when you went to a higher level, then it would be because they would have studied Sanskrit. So they would speak in Sanskrit. That's because Sanskrit is a very unambiguous language.
Oh,
so
completely.
Right?
Yes.
So that is the way they would speak. But then for operations in the local level, when you're dealing with people, you're having accounting, it was important to know the local language. So in this way, both were existing. And Sanskrit was, of course, binding. But it has also been postulated that some version of Hindi was a common link language too.
Okay.
Yes, it is. The Prakrit, which was very similar to today's Hindi, was also being spoken and as a link language, is what I've heard from some scholars. I need to go more into it. That even in the southern part of India also it was being used.
I see. So we have a totally different education system today. Is there any possibility that we could bring back some form of the ancient system in today's world? Do you think that could happen possibly?
It should. It should happen, because one of the things that has happened is that after I wrote my book, I have been coming to know about so many Gurukulas that have been started in modern times.
Okay.
And some of them which are also continuing from, say, 100, 200 years. So, so it's very much possible, because ancient education, whatever we have in the Indian knowledge systems, today it is all coming back with force, right? Whether you take the knowledge of Ayurveda, you take the knowledge of language, linguistics, all that is still relevant today. Nyaya Shastra is the science of logic, is very much relevant today.
Very much so.
If you are evaluating different kinds of evidence, you want to make an inference. So you want to know which of this evidence is valid and which is not. You can definitely use Nyaya Shastra, right? Then Panchanga, the Jyotisha. The knowledge of Jyotisha is nothing but mathematics and astronomy.
It is.
And if you study that in the original form, you learn it in the way it was taught in Vedanga Jyotisha, what it will do is that it will make you understand astronomy much better than the way it's being taught in modern astronomy. It will make you more observant about a lot of things, and you'll know the history of this subject as well. So, so it is very much possible to bring back ancient knowledge systems, which is already being done, promoted by the Indian government. You have IKS. IKS centers are opening in different universities. So that is happening. Plus the Gurukula Paddhati. The Gurukula system, I'm a big advocate of Gurukula education.
Okay.
Because in some of the Gurukulas that I've visited in Karnataka, and now I'm going to Gujarat, I'll be looking at some of them in Gujarat, planning to visit in Hyderabad, near Hyderabad as well. So what is happening is that today there is this problem with students who are not, whose character is not being developed in the schooling system. So they are learning math, science, geography and everything, but that's it. Their character is not being built. So, when adversities come in life, how are they able to cope? What if you lose your job? Now you have to, keep your balance and then start looking, or you have to start your own business. There will be ups and downs. So this character building is not happening in the modern education system.
True.
So Gurukulas can totally take care of that. They can make sure that your core is strong. So once that is strong, and then the other things it's not very hard. If the curiosity is developed in you, if you're curious to know everything around you, why this is like that, why a certain system exists, and then of course you can study modern subjects. And you can also study the Ramayana, Mahabharata, Nyaya Shastra, Jyotisha. So all that blending can happen, and it's happening. So one of the reasons I keep coming back to India is that I go to these Gurukulas to see the different models of Gurukula education.
Okay.
And I have found some very good models. There's one that I keep talking about in every program that I'm invited to. I talk about Vidya Kshetra in Bangalore.
Okay.
Where I've been very impressed with the way they are promoting the arts and skills in their Gurukula. So they are inviting practicing artists or people who are earning a living from that art to come and settle in that Gurukula, so that they are also teaching that art, and the students can also see how they are making a living from that.
Okay.
So it should not be just studying for the sake of studying, but also whether you can make a living from that discipline, right?
Yes.
So promoting different skills and arts can also be a part of Gurukul education.
So what kind of arts are? Can you give some
So here I
examples?
saw that he's a painter. So he's teaching paint and he gets orders. He gets a lot of, he has big customers.
Okay.
But he's painting for them. But at the same time, he's teaching his techniques to the students who are all with him.
Okay.
That is there. Art and music. Many of them are learning music as a part of the Gurukula system. So different kinds of music. But even science, I mean, there are so in that institute, I found that they have like 250 science experiments.
Okay.
So all of these science experiments, when children do them, they get curious. They want to know more. So they're not being taught the scientific principles and laws in the beginning. They deduce them via the experiments.
Okay.
So they do these experiments and they are made to think and reflect. Now that is not happening in modern education.
It's not, yeah.
So they have these exams to pass. There's no time to do independent thinking.
Yeah, there's not.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's not enough exposure to nature. So you're not in the middle of nature looking at the birds and the bees, looking at the different phenomena, looking at the sunsets and looking at why is the color of the sunset like this, optics, sound, all these things can be can be studied as a part of nature.
Yes.
So the Gurukulas are doing that. But of course, what has happened is they are all cash-strapped and they are the ones who are trying to operate on the Dana Dakshina model. For them, it's a bit hard.
Okay.
But it can be done. Wherever, if you have an aware society where they know that these Gurukulas need to be supported and then they donate, then, what will happen? And the parents also should not be just giving for their own children. They should be giving for the other children also. So in that sense, that kind of model I'm seeing. And then, of course, the fees model is also there. That is easy to do.
Yeah.
But if you want to blend the old and the new, it can totally be done. It is very much relevant because if you learn Sanskrit, you're actually learning it the ancient way.
Yeah.
So when you learn Sanskrit, your language, your diction improves, and that is going to improve all the other languages. You'll, in fact, find it easier to learn French and German and other languages as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right? Yeah.
So you can totally be competitive, I'm sure, if you study in a Gurukula as compared to a mainstream school. I think there should not be any problem. Only thing is that the curriculum is still being developed.
Okay.
So this is a transition period where the Gurukulas are thinking, how much should we teach them? I mean, there are only these many hours in a day.
Yes.
But what I noticed in Gurukulas is that they wake up at 4 a.m.
Okay.
So if they're waking up at 4 a.m., then the day starts early. By the midday, they've already done so much. So many of them are studying the classical subjects until the lunchtime. And then after lunch, they're doing the modern subjects.
Okay.
So they're doing all those. So they're studying whatever is being taught in ICSE, CBSE. Plus, they are studying these ancient subjects. Plus, they're doing Cow Seva. They're taking care of cows. They're doing all that as well. And Cow Seva is also a very important part of our culture. So knowing that the importance of cows, right? They are good for the milk, the urine, even the gobar. All of that has been used medicinally in India. And then to be near the cows itself, it's very calming, very soothing. So when you're taking care of animals, that itself brings out many qualities in you. Compassion, right? And of course, how medicinally, that smallpox, the vaccine for that came from cowpox, right?
Yeah, that's right.
They found that people who were taking care of cows were not getting smallpox.
Yeah.
And that is how this whole thing started about how when you take care of cows, you don't fall sick.
Yeah.
So that was observed. And there is a reason why the cow is revered so much. So Cow Seva, Goshala, all that is a part of most of these Gurukulas that I've been to.
Are you in favor of reviving Sanskrit in India?
Reviving?
Sanskrit.
Absolutely. Sanskrit is there. I mean, it never died. It was falsely told to us that it's a dead language.
Yes.
So it was never dead. It was there, but yes, it was not being taught in the modern schools.
Yes.
Or it was taught at a very basic level, just to pass some exam, get 100 out of 100 by, many people took Sanskrit so that they
get it's a scoring subject.
Scoring subject.
Yeah.
But Sanskrit totally should be taught to each one of us, and we should even try to speak in Sanskrit. Because I found that even with the little Sanskrit that I studied, I felt like I'm becoming more rational. I'm becoming more logical because the way we construct those words, so there is a prefix and a suffix, right? And of course, that's not the right word for it. All these translations are poor translations.
They are, yeah.
Right? So so there's an endless number of words that can be generated by following the grammatical rules.
Yes.
So when you study Sanskrit, it's suddenly like for everything you become more logical. And, you also, it connects dots for you. Like so many things you've been doing, so many words you've been using. Now you understand where that word came from, even in English. Right? And so I feel that Sanskrit should be a very compulsory for everybody. To the extent that you can go to, as far as you can go, everybody should learn Sanskrit.
Right. And for a kid, how many hours do you think is okay to study in a day? I mean, too much obviously is not good. So what is the right kind of balance? How many hours should a kid study in a day?
Well, if I look at what the guru what is happening in the Gurukula, I think they are doing at least 5-6 hours of study.
Okay.
But then the rest of it is all as part of nature that they are doing.
So going out in the field or
going out in the field.
Well, that's fun. For a kid, that's fun, isn't it?
Yeah. And maybe 5-6 or maybe more than that also. But they're also memorizing a lot.
Okay.
That is one thing that is very important, which is not a part of modern education.
Memorizing.
Yeah. See, rote learning has bad rap. Right? Rote learning is what Indian education is, rote learning. But the way, if we look at ancient India, memorization was not rote learning per se. It was about committing a whole lot of information to your memory so that you can recall it at the time when you need it. Right? So if you completely learn Panini's Ashtadhyayi, all those 4,000 rules are in your head, then you will just recite it to yourself and you will be able to know whether a sentence is correct or not. What is the way to do it, which rule to follow over here, right? So in a way, when the mind is, when the child is young and the mind is fresh, so instead of filling it up with rubbish things like, in Bollywood, who is married to who and all these things, right? All this stupid information that today's kids have, that should not be there in their mind at all.
Yeah.
So instead of that, make them learn all this, commit this to memory. And there is Upanishad, there are the Vedas, there are so many Shastras. Whatever has been taught down the ages, if it can be committed to memory, I feel that it helps you. So that if it helps you in your writing essays, and those quotes, you don't have to think about, what shall I quote here? It just comes to you. Okay, you use it. Your language becomes colorful. You're expressing well. Or if you're painting, it helps in your, the aesthetic sense, because you have all this in your memory, right? So I think whatever, it might be 5-6 hours of study, and the rest of it is also study, but it is done in a play way, in a fun way.
Yeah.
Games are also a part of education in ancient India. So I have a whole chapter on ancient games. Chess, cards, they all came from India, right?
Right.
So board games were all educational games. So all these things can be a part of the education from morning to evening, so that there is that monotony is not there. You're not just going on reading and cramming. Okay. And the way they memorized in ancient times was not just by saying the same thing again and again, right? If you see the way the Vedas were taught, there was a way in which they chanted, so that you learn in a non-linear way. Because the brain is able to recall better when you learn in a non-linear way. So it looks like our rishis understood that, and they made them learn in a sing-song way, tones, so that you remember all those things, right?
Yeah.
So use the brain. So you don't need so many books if you have your brain itself as a recording machine, and you've kept a lot of data over there to be recalled when you need it. So those are the things. So study hours, exercise, breathing, everything is part of it, and self-control, which is taught in Gurukulas. Self-control, discipline, because if you don't inculcate this at a young age, then once in your 30s, 40s, 50s, you get into those habits and you can't come out of them. You'll keep checking your phone every now and then. It becomes a habit. Now you don't know how to break the habit. But if you have gone through those steps of that education, Gurukula style, you will never get addicted to anything, because your mind is telling you what to do. And this is the way, okay, you do your breathing, you bring your mind to a state where you're not now very bothered about what everybody is writing about you or saying about you, and you will make a schedule and follow it. So self-control, which also includes controlling sexual urges.
Okay.
Because brahmacharya is something that has gone away from our modern education.
Oh, totally, yes.
Brahmacharya.
Yes.
And I devoted a whole chapter on that, because I felt like the root of all the problems today, social problems, is the lack of brahmacharya, which is not taught in the schools today. And it used to be a part of Gurukula education. So which means that the guru would teach the students to get control over everything. Their sleep, their thoughts, the mind images. Because, I think they knew very well what happens in puberty. Happens to both boys and girls. You start thinking about somebody, and so like today what you're seeing, the problems, right? The psychological problems that children are going through.
Yes.
And where I'm living in the US, it's extremely common. Everybody goes for psychological treatment. So there are breakups happening, then you have to get over that breakup.
It's a cycle.
It's a cycle.
Yes.
You go from one relationship to another.
Yeah.
Then, the social media has added to the whole thing. It has made it vitriolic and toxic. So, the moment you break up with somebody, now you're going to block that person. And you have to ensure that person now doesn't know what you're doing. And then all the friends of those people have to be blocked. All these kinds of things. It's just toxic. It's vicious. Now, that wasn't happening in ancient India. And today also, if you go through the Gurukula system, then you will know what to value, what is important in your life, right? And so, in the period when you are going through the education system, you need to ensure that all your energies are towards learning. So, you are there in school to learn. You're not there to make boyfriends and girlfriends or movies, watch movies, discuss the movies, unless you're doing it in a literary way, for a literary purpose. So that's the thing. So once the mind control happens and you know how to block off certain thoughts and focus on the job at hand, and then not be petty about anything.
Yeah.
Like you now think about not just yourself as an individual, but that you're part of a community, you're part of a society, and you have these runas to pay back. You have a runa to pay back, the Guru runa, the Pitru runa, right? You have to pay your parents and their parents and their parents. They have all done lot of tapasya. And eventually now you are here. So you have to ensure that those debts are paid off, which means you have to first of all know enough so that you can also teach your children.
Yes.
Right? So children, and also you have to pay back the debt you owe to your teachers who have taught you all these subjects. It's not to die with you. So if you have not mentored enough number of people and enough number of students so that the knowledge goes on, then you have failed your gurus.
Yes.
So these are the things that are taught in the Gurukula, where you learn what is important and where you know that your conscience tells you when you're doing something like you're wasting your time or you're engaging in negative thoughts, you are going on thinking about things which pull you down, which make you lose your sleep. So, that self-awareness, that elevation of the consciousness.
Yes.
That should be happening in our education system at a young age.
Yes.
When that happens by the time you're a teenager, then you're going to be mature people who can go out in the world and have mature relationships with people, and you can be amicable. If you don't get along with somebody, yes, you can be amicable about it. Or you want to put your point forcefully, you can still do it because now you have the language and the communication.
Yes.
So these are some of the things I noticed.
Right. Now let me go slightly beyond the book. I think it's in 2016 or 2017, you wrote an article about caste. The fact that the West is so obsessed about the so-called caste thing in India. So what was the article about, and how do you see the entire thing about caste? I mean, is caste that relevant in India, and is Indian society really evil for having the so-called caste system?
You don't know how much we have been vilified for the caste system.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting that I used to be asked when I would go to conferences, when I was editor of Asian Water, Europeans would be asking me, what caste you belong to?
Okay.
And nobody had ever asked me in India.
Yeah.
So I would say, okay, I'm a Brahmin. Oh, you're a Brahmin. And then I would see that they have now typecast me in some way.
Okay.
Like an oppressor or something like that.
Okay.
Right? Yeah. So I wrote an article about why is the world so obsessed about India's caste system.
Yes.
Right. And that article was actually more about the Western caste system. I talked about in Europe how there was a very established caste system. So, there are all these people who are grave diggers and, who are doing in different professions. It was basically the jati system, which we have. The same thing they had it too. And they were all marrying within their community. So it would not be that somebody who is an elite person would go and marry somebody who is a grave digger.
What happened?
Right? Or a leather worker.
Yeah.
It wasn't happening there also.
Yeah.
But for some reason, nobody called that as a caste system. Obviously, they were writing about us.
Yes.
So we were not writing about them. So as a result of that, they started writing about our jati varna system, and they didn't understand that it was a unique system, the Kula Varna Jati system. They saw it as a version of their own caste system. And caste itself, as you know, has come from the Portuguese word, casta.
Casta.
So they never found a word which could translate the Kula Varna Jati system, which was in India. Right? So in India, it's extremely complex. So I, in my article, first I explained to the people about what the Western caste system is. I told them about, in Europe, when the toilet waste used to be removed, right? So there would be the gongfomos. I don't know how you pronounce them. You pronounce them. You pronounce it correctly.
Gonfermour.
Oh yeah, gonfermour.
Yeah.
So these were the people who used to go from house to house collecting the toilet waste, putting it in a cart and taking it to the extreme of the city.
Yeah.
And they could only come during the night time to the city. So if they were seen during the day by anyone in the city, they would be fined. So what is this? Is this not a caste system?
Right.
So this is, and were they marrying somebody from, maybe somebody who is a scholar in a university? Would he be marrying somebody who is from this Gongfomo community? So that's what I highlighted. And I was talking about how in India, the Jati system was ensuring that all the different skills were preserved and enough numbers of people were there to practice those skills. So for example, if it was a free for all, what would have happened is, everybody would, the jatis would have dissipated, because maybe whatever is easier would have been taken up. And so suppose you would, like today, if I want to get my shoe repaired, now it's very hard for me to find somebody to get it done, because now that has disappeared.
We just buy new shoes
use
now.
And throw. Now it's a use and throw culture.
Yeah.
So people just throw, they don't get anything repaired. But in India, it was like every profession was meant to thrive and be proud of it. So all these jatis, they had their own, the Jati Purana. They also had their own gurus whom they would extol. They had their deities. So many of them had their own separate deities that they would worship. So this complex system was not understood by the Europeans when they came. And of course, deliberately. They also wanted to say, to create division within the people and make sure that they move away from their whatever they were, who the gods they are worshipping. So India had the Jati system, and there was a Varna system which was based on the Guna, Karma, also Janma. Janma also played a role in the sense that, if you're born in a family of, say, carpenters, then, we can safely assume that you have a good knowledge already of that skill. So if you want to, if a Brahmin comes and says, I want to learn carpentry, then they would say that, you don't come from that family. I don't think you're suitable for this. So in that sense, Janma was definitely mattering. But karma and guna also, if you see Bhagavad Gita, right, what Krishna is saying, that is, all of us have our intrinsic nature by which we can be classified. So if you embrace that intrinsic guna that you have, then you will be your authentic self and you will progress in your spiritual journey. So for instance, I was also thinking that, maybe, some of us are more attuned towards fighting. So we have that Kshatriya dharma in us, that guna in us. So that guna part is what was classifying us. And some of us might be more suited for working, manual labor, and we are very good at it. And somebody else is just not good at it. So those were the kind of classifications that were happening in our society. And that's also because our ancients were obsessed with classifying everything on earth. Because the same jati system you'll find in animals, plants come in different jatis. So this jati of plant, it is good for this this disease, curing this disease. This jati of plants is good for this. So they were using that term jati for everything, right? But for some reason, when the Europeans started looking at our social system, they started attributing negative things to all this classification we were doing. Of course, we can't deny that there was some amount of oppression going on, but a lot of it has happened from the Muslim period onwards. And then, when we talk about the negative aspects of our caste, the Indian caste system, I call it caste system when it's negative.
I think it crept in the past 1,000 years. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, it got worse during the Muslim period. Because, it happens when you are a society under siege.
Under stress in the street,
You become inward looking.
Yes.
You will not let the women go out because, you might be raped, you might be captured. And you want to stay within your community. You become more inward looking.
Insular, right?
Insular.
Yes.
So this is definitely, it got worse during the invasions. And then when the British came, they made it absolutely horrible by doing those caste surveys. So when they did those surveys all over India, where they're asking everybody which caste you belong to, and they're randomly putting them, giving a hierarchy to it. And they have admitted it in many places that we didn't know where to put this person. So we put him under scheduled caste. So you will find some, you don't understand how they have done it. And then it got cast in stone. Because we had a very mobile. There was mobility in our Varna Jati system. So you will find that one surname, one last name belongs to a certain Jati or so-called caste in one village, and you go some 100 miles away. It's that person that in the hierarchy it's higher up or lower down. It will be different. So it looks like when people would move, then they would settle in a new society, and there will be a new status given to them, depending on what they are doing there, what profession they are following, or their gunas or whatever. So it was not cast in stone. Our Varna Jati system was it's a confusing medley of classifications, which was very random and arbitrary. And nobody knew whether it's high or low. They would say, okay, this is higher than this. For example, the Brahmanas who used to do the vaccination, the inoculation, they used to go from village to village giving vaccination for smallpox. They were considered to be a little lower level than the other Brahmanas who were engaged in Vedic studies.
I see.
Now that's because these Brahmanas are dealing with blood. So hygiene was a big thing in our society. There must be some connection with hygiene, because I feel that I see that the Brahmanas were expected to conform to higher levels of hygiene.
I see.
Whereas it was looser and easier as you go into the other Varnas.
Okay.
So it was more lax for the Shudras, but doesn't mean they're not supposed to be clean. But when you're studying the Vedas, you have to have bath so many times a day. You should not be touching any random thing. You have to wash your hands so many times. All those things were there.
Okay.
So it's also a whole lifestyle, and you can't eat meat. All those things were there. So it's about hygiene. It's about eating meat or not eating meat. It's also about how you worship. Now, there was a very good book written by Sudha Mohan on the caste system, which is, I hope more people read his book.
Okay.
I think it is called Shivasya Kulam.
Okay.
An amazing book. It talks about how there was different forms of worship, right? So those who were the Shakti worshippers, the Shakta worshippers, and those who were the typical Vedic people. So the Shakta worshippers had a different way of worship. They offer different things to the deity.
Okay.
So you can even offer meat to the deity.
All right.
And that's perfectly okay. Now the Brahmanas were not doing that. And they say that this is dirty. So this is, we don't want to marry within these communities, or this is not right. Now, the Shakta people, the Tantra people, and the ones who are doing the Vedic worship, they're all going towards the same goal.
In different ways.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're all meeting at one point, and they know it. So there is that, so even if they don't intermarry, there is that respect that is also a valid source of knowledge. That is also a valid way of achieving spirituality and reaching moksha. So these different modes of worship were there, and that was also leading to a classification. Okay, so you will find that the Sattvika way of worship was more common among the Vedic. People were following the Vedic rites, and those who were following the Tantric rites were often using even alcohol, meat, and these things were there, blood. All these are part of the rituals in the worship itself, or even sex is also part of those rituals. So those kind of differences were also there in society, which the British did not notice, and they just randomly made this kind of a caste system. So there were all these communities having different worship practices, different diets, different professions, and they were all proud of themselves. So it's not like, Brahmanas were very small in number, very small. And yet they were respected by everybody, because everybody knew that Vedas have to be preserved. People, it should not be just kept in a book and, nobody's chanting it. The kings knew that if you chant the Vedas every day, the vibrations will benefit society. So keep chanting it day and night. You can't let it go, right? It affects the harvest. It affects the vibrations around, the calm, soothing vibrations that people should have. When you hear, it happens. You might have seen that when you hear the Vedic chants, does it not bring you to a state of calm?
It does.
Very good, right?
Yes.
So that is the reason. Usse ek mahal banta tha. So, of course, that is not the only reason. There is actual power in those Vedic rites, because sound has power. So those who are engaged in the Vedic rituals, Vedic rites, learning the Vedas, they belong to a certain jati, certain varna, and they were respected by everybody. Now, you may not touch or hug each other, or you may not marry, but anyone who sees a Brahmana who has the tejas on his face, and the Brahmana also doesn't look down on all these. He knows all of them are needed in society. Brahmana respects the work of the Shudras, respects what the Kshatriya is doing, what the Vaishya is doing. Brahmana would say, I cannot deal with numbers the way you are dealing with it, the accounting that you're doing. So totally. So it was like everybody knew the importance of preserving the other. Though there were fights, of course, human nature, there will be fights.
Yeah.
But all of them need to be preserved for the diversity and for maintaining the professions and for worshipping all the deities. All the Grama Devtas, all the Kula Devtas must be worshipped. So you will see that Brahmanas are very happy to see that the other people are worshipping their deities. They are not saying don't worship those deities. Now I can give you my own example of my grandmother. So my mother was telling me that if anybody fell sick in the family, she would give some money to the person who worked in her house, the maid, and say, do puja in your temple for my child who is sick. So she's totally acknowledging the deity of the other community, right?
Yes.
And this lady who is working for them also recognizes that in their puja room, they have their own rituals. I am not allowed to enter, which is fine.
Which is fine. Yeah.
And similarly, the Brahmanas would not cross the boundaries when it came to the other communities.
So it was about mutual respect.
Mutual respect. I mean, I'm not saying that I'm making a blanket statement that in every case there was mutual respect, but overall there was mutual respect. There would be sparring and fighting.
It's human society, it's human nature. You're going to have some of that.
The resources, maybe you're fighting for resources. Maybe there's a political power that is some community has gained, getting more favors from the king. So now there's an enmity between two communities. But overall, there is a respect for all the deities, the forest deity, the Gram Devta. You want this Gram Devta is pleased by giving a certain kind of fruit. Or, there's a Shitala Devi, the smallpox Devi. She is pleased by a certain kind of worship. And so every community would say, yes, let her be worshipped the way she wants to be worshipped.
Right. Yeah. So it's like India is held to a different set of standards, Indian society. I mean, you have so much oppression which happened in Europe and all that. The Middle Ages, women were terribly oppressed, but that is totally like whitewashed. No one talks about that. And they have their own Jati Varna system over there as well. You have all these surnames in the West like Fletcher, Thatcher, Smith, which are all occupational surnames.
Right.
So they have the same thing, but they're going to hold us to a different set of standards.
Yeah, that's true. See, this is all the atrocity literature which was developed when initially the missionaries were not being allowed to come and preach in India, right? The British kept them away for some time because they wanted to focus only on exploitation, getting maximum taxes out of every village. Extract. Why get into all this converting them?
Yeah.
But then these missionaries kept putting pressure on the British leaders. Yeah. And so eventually the missionaries were allowed. I came to know that one of the missionaries, Abbé Dubois, who has produced so much literature, atrocity literature against India, it was as a result of the French Revolution. During the French Revolution, a lot of these priests were also kicked out from France.
Okay.
Because, in that whole equality, and they realized that these people were also oppressing. Elites included the clergymen.
Oh, yeah.
So they were expelled and they were all finding places where they could go, and some of them landed up in India. So missionaries from every country, all over the place, they were landing up in India. And because it was all fertile ground for them to convert.
Yeah.
And that is when you find all this atrocity literature about Sati coming up. Sati and what else?
Caste.
Caste, of course. Yeah. Caste. I mean, because the Brahmanas were standing like a bulwark and not allowing conversions because people respected the Brahmins. And the Brahmana is saying that this is what our Veda is saying. This is Paramatma. So you have to do this, practice these austerities if you want to achieve moksha. And now this guy wants to convert them. So first of all, the Brahmana was not allowing it. He was saying, no, what are you talking about? No, this is the way. So we are already good people. We are all law-abiding. We respect our women. So what is the thing that you are trying to tell us?
Yeah.
Right? And in fact, some of the foreign travelers have also written that these people are already good. So why are we converting them? That also, these questions also came from their own people also. But of course, these guys were relentless. They built up and they used to learn languages like Tamil and Kannada so that they can put the Bible in that language and they can distribute that. And then, of course, they used various techniques like telling them that, Jesus is another Bhagwan. You can put that Bhagwan in your puja, part of your puja. And that's how slowly they came in. And then, of course, once people converted, then there used to be a rite where they were told that you can't worship now the Hindu gods anymore.
Yeah.
So this is the way they broke families. They broke families, they broke communities. Now they are all splintered. Communities are splintered.
Yes.
And that's how professions were lost. The knowledge was lost. That's what.
So India essentially is a broken society today. It's a lot of damage.
It is broken and it is all distorted. So now their understanding of jati is totally different. It's not like preserving knowledge. It's nothing about preserving knowledge now. They don't understand the knowledge part or about maintaining the bhakti for the devis, devtas that they have to do. The forests are gone. The grama devatas are not being worshipped. So it's just now being in terms of, by getting into that OBC list or that list so that you get certain benefits from the government, get admission into schools and colleges or marriage, maybe in marriage. And actually it holds no meaning today. Today, what we are calling as the caste system is absolutely meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. Because none of the jatis or the varnas are following the things that they should be doing. They don't do pitru karya. They're not doing nitya karma. Nitya karma, everybody is supposed to do in the morning and evening. They're supposed to do the nitya karma, sandhya vandana, wherein you are expressing your gratitude to all the elements of nature. You're also thanking your ancestors and you're praying for their smooth journey and also journey. And then you're generally doing, calming yourself. You're doing pranayama. The whole nitya karma, which can be done in 15 minutes, is something that is a part of everybody's ritual. If you're belonging to a certain varna or jati, you have to do your nitya karma. That's not being done. So just by saying that I belong to this or that doesn't mean anything. So today we are broken. You're right. We are broken and we should actually get back to our original dharma. So all of us have our dharma according to our whatever whatever ancestors were doing. And we should try to do it because in the end it was about preserving knowledge.
Yes. Right. Another article you wrote was about the Jauhar-Shaka system, that unfortunate phase of Indian history. So I remember that I had asked you a question about how did you pronounce Shaka? Was it Shaka, Saka? How was it?
I'm hearing both actually.
Okay.
I'm Saka, Shaka, both. But what I wanted to highlight in that article was that it's not just about women who used to jump in the fire. Hindu women who are being, when the forts are completely surrounded by the Islamic forces and they know that now death is inevitable. And if the women come into the hands of the marauders, they're going to be raped, they're going to be sold in the slave markets. Then it's better to keep your integrity intact and jump into the fire. Right? So, but it used to be the last resort. So when the women were doing the Jauhar, the men were doing the Saka or the Shaka. They were fighting the last battle of their lives. So the men would go with their swords and go and cut and kill to the last man while the women are performing Jauhar. So, it's such a noble act, right? It's also about, they're preserving themselves. They don't want to be raped. What is wrong with that? But for some reason,
even that's supposed to be something regressive, apparently.
Yeah, it was considered regressive because the women are killing themselves. But let me tell you something interesting. My husband was telling me about his family's history.
Okay.
So he says that going back into their history, his community was against Jauhar, and they said that the women should also fight.
Okay.
So they said that the women should also fight. They should not perform Jauhar.
Okay.
And so the other Rajputs disagreed with them and said, get out if you don't want to do Jauhar. So then they broke up from that and they started moving towards, I think they stopped at Ajmer and then they finally reached Uttar Pradesh.
Okay.
So there was this faction among them who wanted to, where the women also should fight back instead of doing Jauhar. That also was there.
I see.
But overall, yes, the culture was that, it's hard for every woman to be trained in fighting and at the same time, what if she is a mother who is breastfeeding her child? But even then, you will find in the Rajput history, so many brave women. They also knew how to wield the sword. But by and large, they preferred to jump in the fire, to commit suicide rather than fall into the hands of the invaders. That was the culture.
So this was a different phenomenon from what we call Sati, right? Jauhar and Sati are different things.
Absolutely, yeah. The fire part is the same.
The fire part is the same.
Immolation, self-immolation. But in the case of Sati, it was more about, I think the actual name is Anugamana. Anugamana is that you want to die at the same time as the husband. Because you want the same husband in the next birth. When we bind ourselves in matrimony, we take this oath that we will be together forever. So that's the reason the women used to serve, many women used to, not many actually, very few women were performing it. They would then die along with the husband in the funeral pyre. And that's why even in Mahabharata, you have an example of Kunti who doesn't do sati, but Madri does it.
Yes.
And Madri, they tried to dissuade her. They told her, don't do it.
Yes.
But she still did it. So that was the culture of the time.
That's how it was.
Very few. Most women would be persuaded not to do sati, take care of your children, especially if they had children. And if you go back and if you see the text, actually the widows were remarrying in ancient times. The Rig Veda was permitting it. And if you read about Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, the reformer, the Hindu reformer, he was giving examples from Shastras to tell the women to remarry. So it was not some British imposed culture. It was, so if we want to reform ourselves, we just need to go back and read our own texts.
Right.
So that's the way women were told to remarry. Ishwar Chandra was saying that you are going away from your own culture and dharma by making this widow lead this life, this horrible life.
Yes, right.
Educate them, get them married again. So this is our culture.
Right. So what's next for you? Any new books coming up?
I hope I'll get down and finish my caste book. I had started something about it because I'm thinking in terms of talking to the next generation.
Okay.
So where I live in the US, I'm always asked about caste. Young children, Indian origin children, they all ask, were we oppressors? What is this caste system? Were we bad people? And they feel very, they're not able to give good answers. So, of course, good books have been written already. Rajiv Malhotra ji has written a book on caste and many others have written. But I want to write something from a fresh perspective.
Okay.
Wherein, of course, I will also acknowledge the wrongs that have been done in our society, which happened due to various reasons. But at the essence, at the core of it, the Varna Jati system was a good system which helped to increase the prosperity of the country. That's how we were exporting so much. All these jatis, they were producing, they were handicrafts, and it was all home-based industries. And they were producing goods which were all exported, luxury goods, right? So I want to explain the caste system. So hopefully that would be my next book. If not, something on parenting is also something I'm thinking about, because there's a question about how can we ensure that our children know our history, know our rituals, and they feel interested to learn Sanskrit. What should we do in our parenting that they are proud of our heritage? So I'm exploring those thoughts. I'm speaking to parents and listening to their ways of how they have raised their children. So there are so many ideas I feel it should be brought together in a book.
Right. All right. Thank you so much for the wonderful work you're doing. It's wonderful to finally meet you after all these years.
Same here.
And look forward to the next conversation in the future.
Thank you. Wish you all the best too.
Thank you. Hope you enjoyed the conversation. Please share this on your Twitter, Instagram, and WhatsApp so that this podcast reaches a wider audience.